So the new Samsung Galaxy S25 lineup is finally here, and seems like Samsung has started to follow into Apple's footsteps of only introducing incremental updates. So in this video, we're going to talk about if it's worth upgrading to the S25 or if you should be looking over to the iPhone 16. Now, like all our comparisons, this is going to be divided into 5 sections. So we'll talk about the displays, specs, cameras, build, and ultimately talk about which one you should buy. So to kick things off, let's talk about the displays. Now both the phones have the same panels as their predecessors, so the S25 still has the same 6.2-inch AMOLED display with a resolution of 2340 by 1080, giving you a pixel density of 416. Now the selling point with the S25 is its high refresh rate display, something that the iPhone lacks, and we'll talk about in a minute. Now the iPhone itself has the same 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR display from the predecessor, giving you a resolution of 2556 by 1179 and a higher pixel density than the S25 at 460, but it does lack by having a lower refresh rate of only 60 Hz. Now this has been a trend over the last few years, and Apple simply refuses to put a higher refresh rate panel in the iPhone 16 or the base iPhone lineups to help differentiate it with the Pro models. Now I can see the logic behind it, but I don't necessarily agree with it because almost every phone at this price point has a higher refresh rate display, and I feel it's really hampering the base iPhone lineup over the last few years. But keep in mind that the iPhone 16 has a higher pixel density than the Samsung S25. Now Samsung panels in general tend to be more vivid and saturated, which does give a better look to the eye, which makes the display on the S25 look a little bit better than the one on the iPhone. But I feel if Apple can sort the refresh rate issue on the base iPhone lineup, then they'll be right up there with Samsung and all the other phones which have a higher refresh rate. Now moving on, let's talk about specs, because this is one of the areas that has some incremental updates with the Galaxy S25. So right off the bat, you have the new Snapdragon 8 Elite chip on the S25 with Adreno 830 GPU and an octa-core CPU, whereas the iPhone 16 on the other hand has Apple's A18 chip with Apple GPU and a 6-core CPU. Now new on the S25 is a base RAM of 12 gigs across the board, whereas the iPhone 16 still has only 8 gigs. Both the phones have the same storage set, so you have 128 all the way up to 512, and neither of them are expandable, so you're essentially stuck with the storage you purchase. Now the iPhone 16 has a 3561 mAh battery compared to the massive 4000 on the S25. Now both the phones also have IP68 certification, and both of them have their own AI features. You have Apple Intelligence on the iPhone 16 and you have Galaxy AI on the S25. Now this has been the trend as of late, and I reckon it's going to be the case in the future as well. And I do understand the appeal of the AI features and how they help to an extent, but the actual hardware side of things has only been incremental for both the iPhone 16 and the S25. So now let's move on to one of my favorite parts of the comparison, which is the cameras. And right off the bat, there is barely anything new with the S25. You still have the same 50 megapixel wide sensor with a 12 megapixel ultra wide and a 10 megapixel telephoto. The iPhone 16 on the other hand has the same 48 megapixel wide from its predecessor and the 12 megapixel ultra wide. What was new was this new gimmick of the iPhone 16 having 3 cameras in your pocket, where essentially you have a 12 megapixel telephoto image that comes out of your main 48 megapixel wide sensor. Essentially, it is clever image processing in real time, which gives you that third option to use a telephoto lens on your iPhone, but there isn't a physical lens like the S25, so just keep that in mind. It's just essentially 2 lenses on the actual phone. Now both the phones can do 4K video up to 60 frames per second, but the S25 actually takes it a step further and you can do 8K video up to 30 frames per second, which honestly is just wild. Now both the phones can record slow motion video at 1080p up to 240 frames per second, and the S25 has 10-bit HDR and HDR10 plus recording, whereas you only get HDR recording on the iPhone 16. Now you do get a cinematic video mode on the iPhone 16, which is something the S25 lacks, but I feel overall there isn't anything new with the cameras on both the phones from their predecessors. Now up the front you have a 12 megapixel sensor for both the phones, and they both can do 4K video up to 60 frames per second. Now honestly, I feel we have hit the ceiling on how good smartphone cameras be for now, and both the phones actually have really amazing cameras, which is why you see barely any differences from their predecessors with the new lineups. Now, you have to keep in mind that there are some small differences in the image processing which makes a difference, but I feel if you're looking for a better video camera, then the iPhone is still the king, but the disparity isn't as big as it used to be, and I feel all the other manufacturers are slowly catching up to iPhone in terms of the video department. Whereas if you want a picture that's more saturated and more sharpened, then you go with the S25. Now, last but not the least, let's talk about the build. So both the phones have this sort of boxy, flat, squared off edge design, and they both have an aluminum frame. Now you can get both of them in some different colors. So you can get the S25 in icy blue, mint, navy, silver shadow, pink, gold, coral red, and this new color called blue black. So it's just one name. And the iPhone 16 on the other hand comes in ultramarine, teal, black, white, and pink. And both the phones start at $799. But the question still remains, which one should you buy? Now, the answer to this is twofold, because it depends if you are interested in upgrading your phone or if you're interested in changing ecosystems. Now, if you are on a previous gen device, say the iPhone 15 or the S23, then I would say there honestly is no point in upgrading. To be honest, even if you are on the iPhone 14 or the S22, even then there is little change that actually warrants an upgrade unless you are on a phone plan which basically gives you a new phone every 2 years. The only big difference now is the new AI features on board on both the phones, and as I previously mentioned, to an extent it's just a new selling gimmick as opposed to anything that's hardware changed on the phone. I can't see any reason why we couldn't have these features on the previous gen. But as I said before, I feel we have hit a ceiling on how good phones can be for now and how much manufacturers can upgrade them year on year, because these are good phones, but so are the ones from 2 years ago. Now, this does change a bit if you are moving ecosystems, where if you want to get into Apple and iOS, then the iPhone 16 is near perfect for that. You do miss out on certain features from the Pro lineup, but you also pay $200 less. But if you're looking to move away from iOS and iPhone and looking to move into Android, then I would suggest getting the S25, as it is the best introduction to Android. Now, I am a bit reluctant to call one phone better than the other because I feel a phone is meant to fit your needs and your purpose, and one ecosystem or one phone can do that better than the other. I myself take a lot of videos and love the Apple ecosystem because I have been using this all my life, whereas you take my sister, for example, she has been using the Samsung ecosystem and prefers the pictures on her Samsung than on my iPhone. So it really comes down to which phone and which operating system fulfills those needs better and which one you prefer end of the day. Now, these are solid phones and I feel these are still the best introduction to get into iOS and Android, but I feel both Samsung and Apple haven't tried in a good minute, and I really hope they do with the next lineup. But that is pretty much it. Thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, give it a big thumbs up and stay tuned for more. Until then, peace.